We'll just go for about an hour.
Just for that 1 hour. Okay, very cool. Hey guys, for everyone who's going to come back and watch this later, my name is Ronald Long. I'm the middle school pastor out at Wayside Chapel in San Antonio, Texas. And I wanted to have a conversation with some guys who are totally rocking middle school ministry because I want to get to know how to do this thing better, and I want you guys to benefit as well. So I've got Mark Eads, got Brett Eddy, and Taylor Schwander. They're going to come and share some awesome insight into middle school ministry with us, and I'm looking forward to it and see what we can learn ministering to these awesome squirrely kids. All right, so I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves with where you're from, what's the name of your church, and how long you've been doing middle school ministry, what that has looked like. Brett, why don't you start us with both of the guys in your room there?
Okay, cool. My name is Brett. I've actually been doing student ministry for 14 years, all at the same church. It's called Port City Community Church in Wilmington, North Carolina. It is an awesome little like beach, surf, and skate community, which is awesome. It fits me well. I have done all different types of student ministry, from middle and high school combined to separate. The last year and a half or so, I've directed our whole student ministry, high school and middle school together. But the 3 years leading up to that, I did just middle school ministry, and I loved it. It was great. But when I moved into the new role, that's when we hired Taylor. So Taylor, you want to tell them about yourself?
Hey, I'm Taylor. I've been doing student ministry for about 7 years now. High school and middle school, kind of children's, and anyone under 25 was thrown in there at some point. And now just kind of focusing on middle school here at Port City Community Church for this last year, going into year number 2 right now. So pretty cool.
Very cool. Hey, Danny, welcome having Mark and them. Hey. Guys, introduce themselves here real quick. Mark, go for it.
Awesome. My name is Mark Eads. I'm the middle school guy at a church called New Covenant Bible Church in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I do not have any surfing or anything else. I think the closest surfing we do is we look at the cornfields. Besides that, I've been doing this for 15 years here, over 15 years here at New Covenant. Been in full-time youth ministry for over 20 years. I get the privilege of working with another youth guy. Our high school guy's been doing this ministry for over 25 himself. So between the two of us, we've been doing this for a pretty long time, and been a blessing to be able to do it, that's for sure, and be in a church that allows us to focus in on such a specialty like we do.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I've definitely gotten the looks of, oh, you're the middle school pastor? Wow, you must be like really brave or really stupid. And so I definitely have grown in my care of these students and how much I love them and know what God can do with them. And so it's been a really cool ride for me to watch it happen. But I want to get you guys advice. Brett, again, we'll start with you guys. What do you think has been for you and for Taylor, and you're now 2 years there at that church, what's been the best thing that you have experienced about middle school ministry? And then whenever I'm not talking, I'm going to mute my microphone so that, like, if I sneeze or something like that, it's just not going to come up. So it's just you guys talking. So what's been the best thing about middle school ministry, in your opinion?
That's a pretty big question. Best thing about middle school ministry, I think I love the energy, honestly, that middle schoolers bring. Having done both high school and middle school for a while, they're different. They're so different from each other. And what a middle schooler likes, obviously, is so much different than a high schooler. But what middle schoolers bring, especially ours, they bring a lot of energy. Like, you don't have to manufacture that energy or that excitement. They're curious about things. They get excited easily about things. So when it comes to programming, it almost makes programming easy. You almost have to figure out, at least in our context, we have to figure out how to like bring the programming level down to like make sure they don't get too hyped, because they come in and our context it's a large context. So we've been averaging about 300 students at the beginning of this year, just for middle school. And so you get that many middle schoolers in the same room, it can create a lot of chaos. Yeah. But that, like, I would say probably over the last couple of years, what I'm most excited about, I just love the energy that they bring. It's super fun. Yeah, Taylor.
My favorite part is just the realness. They don't have the church terms or the, you can't go here in ministry. The questions we get in small groups and the things that they're struggling with are like real life issues. And it's not a churchy feel, but it's just like raw ministry every week with kids that are really have big questions in their lives and just want some guidance and help.
Yeah, I was leading and crazily, you never know what to expect, especially when you're leading a small group, because I was leading my 8th grade guys. I continue to lead a small group in the middle school ministry, and my guys are in 8th grade. And I can't remember what the topic was supposed to be 2 weeks ago, but a kid asked about what is the difference between Catholic Church and our church. And we had a half-hour-long conversation of church history, and they were in. I'm like, this is like, what are we doing with 8th grade boys? And but it was really cool. That goes to say, you never know what they're going to ask. You never know what they're going to say, and they just put it out there. I live with a middle schooler too. I have a 12-year-old in 7th grade, and I never know what I'm going to get from her either. So
keep on your toes.
Yeah.
I am a long way away from living with a middle schooler. My oldest.
It happens fast, man.
My oldest is 7 right now. It's going to happen eventually.
Oh, listen, you're 4 years away. It's coming fast.
I know, and she's begging me to stay in middle school ministry up until the point that she gets into the middle school, because she sees it, she loves it.
Yep.
Mark, what's the best thing about middle school ministry for you, man? What's been the best experience that you've had, or the best thing about the whole thing?
Wow, there's so much. I agree with Brett and Travis. Did I get the name right? I'm sorry. Taylor. Sorry, dude. I'm big time. Look at me really, really bad and everything else.
Well, Travis was my brother's name, and he was really good friends with my brother, so that works.
So you would respond to that even. So we're good. So we don't have enough time to kind of cover everything. There's a reason why I've been doing this for 15 years, and that's because it's middle school kids. It's 11 to 14-year-olds is kind of the context of my space. I'm actually on the other end of what you guys are at as parents. My oldest is in college, my middle's in high school, and my youngest now is just finishing his 8th grade year. So my wife and I have been living that for a while now, which has been awesome. I think probably one of the big things is I love the curiosity. I do love the energy, the curiosity. I love to just kind of park on the curiosity with the kids and then explore for them things that they've never tried before. Like this Sunday, I'm getting together and we're teaching a group of kids how to run tech for our sound system in our youth space, and they're completely. I've got 5 right now that run it completely. They know it better than anybody else, including most of the adults in our church. And so we're training like 10 more, and guess what those 5 are doing? They're training the 10. And these are, this is 7th, 8th graders training 6th and 7th graders. So to me, that's probably some of the most incredible thing is watch them discover, because sometimes they find out, I don't like pushing buttons and moving things. This is stupid. And, I'd love doing that too, and just working through that stuff and giving them opportunities. So that's my passion. I love it when that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah, that's awesome. Taylor, I agree with your statement of there being realness. I call it being awkwardly authentic. They don't really know why they're just like word vomiting everything, and it's like, you know what, most people would find this socially unacceptable, everything that you're telling me right now, but I'm totally cool with this. Keep talking, like this is fun. You're telling me.
It's almost like if the rest of society could be like middle schoolers in that way, I feel like we'd be able to like have real conversation more often. I just it's almost like something we can learn from middle schoolers, to be able to be a lot more open and maybe have a little more tact. That's where we as adults can apply what we know in our life experience. But it's a great lesson to learn from middle schoolers, the fact that they are willing to ask anything and be curious.
And we're giving them that permission.
Yeah.
That's the huge.
I agree with you guys. That's probably one of the powerful things is that when you give them space to try something and fell forward or fell fast or whatever, fail, blah, 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 that's out there, because I think there's 20 million different fails. But giving them that space to be able to have those kind of conversations and not go, oh my gosh, did you just say that word? No. And, and not have that kind of reaction to them, but just listen to them and ask, follow-up questions and, hey, explain that to me better and stuff. Oh man, that creates great joy for me when I sit down and just have long 30-minute conversations with a kid who's just offloading stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, if you can get a kid to focus for 30 minutes, that's pretty great. I mean,
and again, if you're willing to listen to them, you find it's not actually that hard. All you have to do, I've got kids who play League of Legends. I can have kids and they'll sit there and tell me everything about League of Legends for 4.5 hours if I allow them. So
if you let them, yeah.
Yeah, you just have to. So they can. It's just you got to find out the context of where they're going to go, and then manage that through powerful questions.
Sweet. All right, dudes. When I was starting out in ministry, I think I was in the spot where most guys start out with, right? I was in charge of everybody. Right. So I get the youth group, and the youth group is 7th to 12th graders. Right. And I made the mistake due to being young and stupid and inexperienced. It was kind of like, okay, I'm going to give the high schoolers the important jobs, and I'm going to wait for the middle schoolers to grow up. And when the middle schoolers grow up, then I'll start doing stuff with them. So like the typical youth pastor who's in charge of everybody and has everyone, what would be your advice or your challenge to them on how they can reach middle schoolers, how they can minister middle schoolers, and Mark, definitely what you were talking about earlier, how they can minister with these students rather than just to them. And so what advice would you give to the youth pastor who's over everybody, they have middle schoolers, are trying to figure out what to do with them? What would you guys say to that?
Well, in my first 5 years, that's the context I came from. I know for me, I think as soon as you have the resources available, the human resources, the finances, the space, the time, to me, dividing high school and middle school is actually, I think, a very critical dynamic that would benefit most any youth ministry, not in the sense of taking them completely away from each other, but there is, and we were talking about it beforehand, there's a lot of difference between a 6th grade boy and a 12th grade girl. There's lots of difference there. And anybody asking anybody to be able to try to unpackage anything, especially God's word, in between those two dynamics, that's an incredible feat to do. So that's one of my biggest encouragement is when you can, and it's in a good context, the right way, and that kind of stuff, the better for you and for your kids and for the parents too, really. And the other thing to me is to set them up for success is, find the things that they like, they enjoy, and then figure out ways to make it possible for them to do it. If they love to serve, find a place for them to serve. If they enjoy being up front, work through the I just forgot the wrong word, egotism of that. It's like, look at me, but unpackage that with them. I mean, sometimes we try to tell those extroverts, hey, you got to calm down, stop that. No, don't get all intense. To me, I like going, no. I mean, you guys were talking about energy. That's, your extroverts, once they start extroverted middle school kids, that's energy for you. But have a way to be able to focus that and give them space to be able to do that, and then coach them through. Man, you're gonna rock and roll in so many ways. So I'm trying to make this as quick as possible, but I mean, I could keep on going. Anytime you can, I ask myself 2 questions a lot of times. I ask myself the question, if there's something I'm doing right now that I think a middle school kid can do, or even a high school kid in this context, why wouldn't you figure out a way to make it possible for them to do it? Just start they're not going to do it as good as you can, but let them do it. And then the second one is if you got a leader, and I always coach my leaders with this, and that is if you got somebody, get people beside yourself working with the kids. Sooner the better. You don't need a Lone Ranger this, ever. And then asking the question, what are something that you're doing as a leader? We call them sponsors, our adult leaders. What are you doing that you could hand off to a kid? And what would it take for me to help you do that? So, I mean, those are some big ones to me.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Mark. The one thing I thought of, Ron, when you were asking the question, making the mistake of holding the good stuff until they get into high school, it made me think of content. I think a lot of times we hold off on some topics until they get into high school, or we don't deal with the deeper theological things. And I think there are probably some things that are going to be more applicable to high schoolers than middle schoolers. But I think sometimes we make the mistake of holding content until they get to a certain age. And I think that most middle schoolers and high schoolers can handle the same content and the same topics. It just changes. You have to just change the way that you present it. Or you're going to take a different aspect of that same topic in middle school and you're going to build upon it in high school. So I was thinking about more the content side of things when you asked that question. But Mark, as you were speaking, and right there at the end, you said like you thought, what are the things that our leaders could hand over to our kids? I know that there are a lot of our middle school leaders, especially in the male side of the small groups where the boys can be a lot more rambunctious and crazy in small group. I know leaders who basically take the little sheet of small group material that we create for them and hand it to a kid and said, all right,
yeah,
you got it. And they found that those kids, like the rest of the kids in the group, take it so much more seriously when the kids are responsible for different things. Or they'll like our different leaders will make sure that they rotate who does the prayer at the end of the small group time and stuff like that. So like just those little parts of small group and the little aspects of growing into an adult, things that adults do and take naturally, you can hand those things off in a church setting. Like, Taylor, anything to add?
I mean, it might sound like really simple or basic, but just creating space for them, you know, like that's huge, because I feel like so often we create something that we feel like is going to be fun, and it's hard for us to put ourselves back in the middle school thought, you know, and we expect them to be on board and want to be a part. And this was so fun when we used to do it.
Right.
And trying to think through, like, how are we engaging this group of middle schoolers? What are we offering them that they actually feel like this was intentionally designed for them to come and be themselves?
Yeah.
I think that's going to connect middle schoolers to your ministry, and then it's going to lead them to roles of serving in tech and in other areas, because they feel like they actually belong as a part of your group. So
that's good. That's good. Yeah, if I could piggyback on what you guys are saying, one of the things we try to do is we also tap into the kids to evaluate this stuff. So in other words, like what you were saying, Brett, when they were, you hand off the sheet and the kid leads it. One of the things we try to do then is, and again, we create the environment to do this, to allow the kids to speak into that. Hey, Johnny just led the group for the last 10 minutes, guys. Here, let's real quick, let's give him some feedback of how he did. What's one thing you guys really liked about what Johnny did with this discussion? And just kind of allow the group to kind of affirm and agree. But then we also, and again, we got to create the environment. We also give them permission to be able to say, well, what's one thing that maybe Johnny could have done a little better, or he could have explained a little bit easier for us to understand, or something? What's some things that make it possible for her to make Johnny do this just a little bit better? What do you guys think about that? And again, that's a little dangerous. You get 11, 12-year-old, 6th grade boys evaluating each other. You got to be real careful to make sure, well, Johnny, that was really stupid. What you did was that dumb, you know, and not set Johnny up for failure and be hurt. But I think there's something about allowing both those questions. How did they do, and what's something they could do better? And I love it, because in that context, then for me, I get feedback from the kids all the time now. That's just a culture that we created in our space. So I get kids come up to me now. Again, what you guys said, they're raw. So I'll get the Pastor Mark, that message was really dumb, you know. But I love to unpack it. Well, hey, tell me why was that dumb, man? What were some of the things I did? Well, you sat there and picked your nose the whole time, man. So I mean, you gotta figure out in context why they're saying that and work with them through that, I think. And as soon as they start to realize, hey, I want your input, man, now it becomes a problem of making sure they don't give it too much to you, because it overwhelms you with all this information they give to you. But I'd rather deal with that than not much.
And I think it starts when it comes like into the doors, because I think we've designed, and it's kind of been all throughout youth groups all over the country, is like we want it to feel like a coffee shop. And when you think about middle schoolers, that's not necessarily their culture.
Yeah.
You know, so we want them to come and be a part of this. Hey, let's hang out and let's conversate. But they're active. You know, like they want to do things.
Yeah.
And so the more we can help them do that, we're going to see a huge jump in middle schoolers wanting to be a part. So.
Yeah. We just created what I call a middle school social space, and basically it's a gym.
Yeah.
You know, it's basically, you know, a space that we can let them run around and run around like I said, I call it a middle school social space. That's how I was able to sell it to my leaders, is to say, hey, we're creating this, but it's a half a gym is what it was. So, and it works great for the kids. They know that space is theirs. And there's this feeling of belonging. They want to bring their buddies, their friends. Hey, dude, you need to come and check this place out. You know, we get to play this game. We play dodgeball once a month. You know, those hooks that draw the kids in, and then to be able to unpackage God's truth and love for them in a way that maybe they've never heard before.
Yeah, that's awesome. The idea, Taylor, of building a Gaga ball pit instead of like a coffee bar for your middle school students. I mean, like, okay, like, sure, the high school senior, they want to like chill and drink their Starbucks. That sixth grader does not want to chill, right? That's not in his wheelhouse.
Yeah, he still want to drink his sugary whatever, so he can get really, really wired. But
yeah, you know. But then he wants to like run 3 miles.
Yeah, right.
Chad and Danny, I see you guys there. I'm glad y'all are listening. I want you guys to think of questions you can ask these middle school ministry experts here in just a little bit. But I want to shoot one more.
I don't know.
Expert, buddy, expert. Listen to that, Chad Fight.
Just saying. Don't think about it.
You put that label of expert out there really, really quick. I'm like, oh, baby.
You guys have been doing it a lot longer than I have. I appreciate this. This is all really good stuff. All really good stuff. But for me, I think about my biggest struggle when I am doing middle school ministry, because there are lots of things that are difficult about it. Like the high school pastor here will often be like, all right, man, I'm going to go at Whataburger, meet a couple students. And like all he did was send out a text and 20 kids show up. Like, well, that's great, man, because all of your, like half of your kids have driver's licenses. Like, you know, so I think of like the struggles of middle school ministry and what is difficult about it. So what do you guys think would be like, hey, man, this is my top struggle with middle school ministry. This is the thing that is the hardest for me to compensate, or even could be, this is the hardest lesson I had to learn when diving into middle school ministry. This was the toughest thing. What's your biggest struggle, hardest lesson learned maybe?
I would say
Yes.
One of the things that you mentioned, like the high school pastor being able to just kind of reach out and the kids will just show up because they have transportation. We actually talked about this in a meeting yesterday. We were talking about follow-up with students, and we have a really high invite culture. So kids are really inviting their friends, and we've got new kids every single week, like sometimes double-digit new kids every single week.
Cool.
And but we're starting, and we are seeing a little bit of growth, but not the kind of growth you would expect with that many new kids. So we're like, okay, what are some strategies we can do to do follow-up and stuff like that? And it's like, we send a letter to parents. Maybe we need to call parents, because, and this is kind of where I'm coming with the learning. Learning is that middle school ministry is still very much a family ministry, and you've got to figure out how to do ministry with parents. Because if I'm a middle schooler, my friend invites me to come with them 1 week to our middle school ministry, the only way I'm going to come back if I'm not hanging out with that friend again is if my parent brings me back. Like if I went home with my friend, and the only reason I'm there is because I went home with my friend from school, the only way I'm going to be back and be a part of that is if somebody's reached out to my parents. So I think one of the biggest things I had to learn in doing middle school ministry is that it is as much about connecting with the parents, and it is still in high school ministry. You still have to connect with parents, because that is when high school is when parents start really checking out. But so it's a little bit different in middle school ministry, but it's, I think, even more important in middle school ministry because they're the rides, they're the source, they are the ones who are going to schedule. So I think as a middle school pastor, you have to see yourself as somebody who's not just working with students, but you're also working with parents.
I think it goes into connection points, you know, and outside of the church. That's one of the things, being in a new area, you know, is something we've talked about recently, is how am I getting out with the students more?
Yeah, because Taylor just moved here from Florida a year ago, so he doesn't have context for Wilmington yet, so he's still learning that.
So trying to, you know, obviously get involved with the schools. You want to be a big partner and supporter as much as you can at the events, at the sports games, as involved as you can be to kind of open that door, because as soon as you show up and make that connection with someone that recognizes you, and now all of a sudden you're introduced to 10 new kids, you know, because they're all just sitting there hanging out together.
So, where a high school pastor can say, "Hey, come meet me where I am," you almost have to figure out where are the students, and you have to go to where they are
to go,
because they don't have the mobility.
Yes.
So.
I like that, guys. I just want to piggyback on that. I think parent relationship is crucial and key to middle school ministry. I want to say something, and this will probably step on some people's toes. I do not believe we're partners with parents. Parents have their kids a lot longer they will ever have than I will ever have with kids. Now we got uniqueness in the sense of longevity and other things that we can get in, but I always struggle when I hear partnering with parents. And the reason why is because I want our ministry to be a blessing to them. And so a lot of times I think of us more of a supplement to what the parents, especially parents who are trying their very best to raise their kids for the glory of God. And and there's already that struggle. Middle school kids, they're going through that context of their pushing away from their parents or from even some certain people, and they're bringing in others like coaches or a teacher that they actually like because they're a fun teacher. How many times have we heard the generic word fun from our middle school kids? And so there's that kind of, I think, the importance of making sure we come alongside and tell parents over and over and over again, hey, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. I care for you. One of the things, really piggyback on what you said, Brett, I think one of the things that we try to do is recognize first-time guests, kids that come in a way that's not awkward. So we do a thing called candy showers is all we do. So I hear about a kid that comes in and then we just throw a bunch of candy at that kid. But then the next thing that we do is that if that kid shows up a second time, we make a big deal out of that as well, in the sense of we have a kid come and talk to me afterwards, and I give them a gift card to our cafe. But that triggers for me a letter that I send out to the parents of that kid to say, hey, we know the first time maybe a buddy brought them, and so they got transportation that way. But a lot of times, second time, that kid went to mom and dad or whoever's taking care of them and said, hey, I like this place. Could I go back? And so I want to recognize that. And so I send out an actual snail mail, slow poke mailing to the parent's address and say, hey, we recognize that you decided to send your kid again to us. And we just want to let you know, we know how hard it is to be a middle school parent and the roughness and time and taxing and craziness. So we just wanted to recognize that. And thank you so much for giving your kid a second chance. If there's something we can do for you, and you'll be fascinated how many follow-ups and connections we'll get through with the parents with that. I've got a dad who I went and had sixth grade. He's got a sixth grade girl, and I spent 2.5 hours with him at a pizza place this last week. He just kind of offloading his life, and I found he's de-churched. He's not interested in church a lot, but yet he was willing to spend 2.5 hours with his daughter, who's gone, I think, 3 times to our group. And so that's part, to me, that's part of why we're in this. It's why we're also in ministry as a whole. And you know what? The difference we're making in that little girl's life now, because I got a chance to listen to her dad, I think now a whole different story, in my opinion.
Mark, I want to hear where you're we kind of keep doing this. We get off topic because Ronald asked us a question and we're like piggybacking. I want to hear what
middle school ministers. What do you want? That's the thing.
Control chaos.
His question was, what have we found to be the most difficult thing, right? Is that it, Ron? I'm just curious, having done it for 15 years, focused on middle school and junior high or whatever you call it there, what has been one of the things you found the most difficult?
I think in the context of been doing this long is the fact it changes regularly. Of all ministries that are in a church space, we are the biggest transitional space always. Every 3 years, I have a whole different group of kids for me. And a lot of other ministries, in every 2 years, they've got a whole different group. And so trying to stay on top of that, I mean, think about fidget cubes and spinners. I don't know about for you guys, they're pretty much dead around here. But man, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, we had started thinking about policies and how we're going to make sure these kids are not distracted by it. You know what I mean? And that just tells you the context. We're on a constant, continuous flux, and we got to be okay with that continuous changeover. And to me, that's the biggest. I always tell people, I say, you don't solve this. This is not a solvable thing. It's purely managing. You manage this, and you find out about the culture. And again, I love how you talked about context. Here you are, you've been there for a year. You're still trying to figure out things. Do you connect to kids at schools? Do you connect to kids you got to figure out that context. Everybody's going to be a difference in their space that they're in. If you're in a small rural area, you might find out the cornfield's the best place to go and hang out with kids. You go to the beach area, hey, just plant yourself at a beach, and parents are bringing the kids over there. It just really is, but you got to find that, and to me, middle school ministry of all places, the most difficult is always a moving target. It never stops.
I think one thing I just noticed being here for a year and everything new was I made a mistake of grouping middle schoolers all in one group. Yeah. Like instead of thinking through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I think that's really helped me this year of what is a 6th grader feeling, thinking through, what is a 7th grader dealing with, and what is a 8th grader. Like I feel more prepared this year than I ever have in doing student ministries because I've kind of stepped back and said, how can we really reach this age, this grade, and make them feel like they're a part of what's going on?
Yeah, and so as a result of that, he and the other staff member we have doing student or middle school ministry, they said, all right, we're going to do a specific just 6th grade retreat. So this last weekend, to be able to minister really well to those 6th graders and help them feel connected, they made sure, we had like 20-something leaders.
20 small group leaders with about 65 middle 6th graders.
Right, and like that ratio was just incredible. And like how those kids they feel so much more connected now to our ministry because of the time. And that just comes with Taylor now learning, okay, I need to see these guys as individual grades and not just a conglomeration of just middle school. So I like the fact that you took a step. You said, hey, we need to figure this out, and here's what we're going to do to meet that need.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And you can I'm meshing those two things together, like even just thinking about it. Like, Mark, what you're saying is that our ministry to middle school students, I feel like I'm blessed because I do have 6th through 8th grade as well. If it was just 7th through 8th grade, I'd just be blown away. Like, I've got these kids for 2 years. Like,
yeah, that's hard.
That's just a short time to make relationships with them. But because I've got them for 3 years, I really see that transition happen. And you're right, that 6th grade student who comes in, we had our promotion about a month and a half ago, a little bit more than that. But like, those 6th graders, when they move up, like, they're tiny, like they are children, right? Yeah. But at the same time, when I was pushing my 8th graders away, I'm going, okay, you guys are freshmen now, you're teenagers, right? And we get them through that transition period, and I love it. So having been here now for 4 years, I've had the chance to watch that happen a couple times and watch the 6th grader turn into 8th grader and just see how that handoff works. Because I get them from the children's ministry, man, they are a kid, right? And if they're the firstborn kid, like, special blessings on them and their parents, because right, they're struggling, they're trying to figure it out. Like, their parents' mind is blown because, oh no, my kid's in the youth group now. But then by the time you get to hand them off to 8th grade, like, they've got a handle on the situation. They kind of are beginning to understand who they are slightly as a person, and that's just all been in transition the entire time they've been working. So, man, that's some really good stuff, guys. Yeah, I agree with you, Mark. That's awesome. It is constantly changing. Like, when I look over funny things that we did a year ago, they're not funny anymore. Like, right. They're done. And if somebody brought it up right now, it'd be like, boo, why are we even talking about, like, you're talking about fidget spinners. I can't remember what the funny thing was last year. Like, what even, like, we'd be talking about at that point, because
Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, guys, I think there's also a significance, and again, maybe I'm speaking because I've been doing this so long, is the significance of your relationship with the children's ministry and the significance of your relationship with the high school ministry. And that, to me, also can be a make or break for you, in my opinion, and anybody, especially since we sit in the middle of that. And there's so many formidable, Ronald, you did a great job of explaining going from being actual kids, concrete thinking kids, to they're just starting to figure out this conceptual mindset. By the way, Mark Ostreicher has written a number of really excellent material to kind of think through some of these kind of transitional things. Him, as well as, like, of course, Kurt Johnston over at Saddleback. Yeah, Scott's material in there is really, really good as well.
The best.
That's really, and again, that's got some age to it, but it's still, that's some good material. But those guys, anybody's listening to this and you're looking at middle school ministry, you've been doing it for a little while, or you're kind of like, how in the world do I do this? Those guys are rock stars in finding out how to do these kind of things. But I will say this over and over again. If your relationship with a children's ministry is just cordial, or I would sacrifice time, energy, effort, everything you got to change that. In my opinion, that's huge. As well as a lot of times relationship with the high school ministry and middle school seem to kind of be fairly well, I found, in most context. But even in that too, I can't encourage that more. It's two of my closest friends in this space where I'm at is the children's pastor and the high school pastor. And I make that, I intentionally sacrifice a lot of other time and energy for those two things. Now, for some, I know that's a difficult thought process, and I know for some, that can be a big deal. But the fact that you're getting fifth graders, soon to be sixth graders, just that handoff, and I've seen such a change in our ministry probably about the last 8 years when I've made the children's ministry, my relationship with the children's pastor, a high priority. We've changed a ton because of that.
That's some good advice, man, for sure. I can't claim this one. This is not mine. This was set up by the guy before me. But they spend the last 2 months, our fifth graders spend the last 2 months going through what they call transitions class. And so they, up until this point, all children's ministry on Sunday mornings is age and gender divided, right? And so when they get to middle school on Sunday mornings, it's all together because that's our large group teaching time. When the fifth graders come in, they do a month and a half of all together, guys and girls together, understanding what that looks like. They actually come in and they do worship with us for a while, and then they go back. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff of them transitioning from children's into middle school ministry. And so not my idea. I wish I could claim it. They already had it set up for me when I got here, and it is a fantastic ministry that they do to prepare them for that jump. So that's some good stuff, Mark. I don't want to tell everybody that I'm friends with a high school pastor because, I don't want to give him a big head, because I think he's really smart and a really great youth dude, but don't tell him I told you that because he's a great guy doing some really awesome ministry. And yeah, we do a lot with that. Oh, Chad, you're bringing in the question. I'm not going to answer this. Could you say experts only, please? What's your schedule look like? Oh man, hey, it went away. All right, so Chad, type that question again. I don't even know how you did that wizardry. Oh, here it is, over here. What's your schedule look like? Time with students, prep time, experts only. All right, so I'm going to back out of this one. All right, so what does your schedule look like? You're as a middle school pastor. Is that different? Do you feel like that's different than a high school pastor would have a schedule? And Brett, you might be able to speak to that, holding some different things there.
Yeah, well, my role right now is so different that I'm working more with our staff. So I spend a lot more time with our staff and in meetings and kind of figuring stuff out from time to time. I think it's also contextual, like the size of the church, location of the church, like where you are in the country. So it's hard to kind of come up with a general schedule that's going to fit for everyone. Our context, man, we are spending a lot of time working as a staff, really helping our leaders, setting stuff up for our small group leaders, creating the program, creating curriculum, creating content, making sure camp's ready to go. And we're doing all that so that our leaders can be spending time with students. So that's when I think the biggest things we need to work on as a staff is how do we get time with students? Because yeah, I lead a small group, but that's like an hour to an hour and a half a week. Taylor, you could talk about your schedule and what you're doing a lot because your focus is just on middle school ministry.
Yeah. Again, being here, it's been a focus on really logistics and getting things operating smoothly when you're dealing with a large number of students and leaders. And one of the things I've personally struggled with is realizing, I came from a ministry of maybe 40 to 60, depending on the night. And
that was high school and middle school.
High school and middle school. And, like I knew the kids, you know, and we were together. And a personal struggle of realizing that like I need to connect with leaders. Like when we have 300 middle schoolers come in and they're meeting with a small group leader, that small group leader is considered their youth pastor over me. Like I communicate from stage, but they have those relationships. They know what's going on in the families. They let us know. And so that there's, you know, right now it's a transition. It's, am I spending enough time with my leaders that are continuously pouring into all these students?
But I also feel like there have been seasons where we've allowed that to get us off the hook of making an effort to get with students.
Yes.
And that's where I'm like feeling like we can't allow that to be an excuse for us, because it's important for us to be with students outside of the context. So.
And that was one of the biggest things in my just review and my job review was how are we going to continue to get time with students, because it's easy to come into the office. It's easy to think through logistics.
And it's not like we're sitting around the office doing nothing.
No, yeah.
Like we are like getting stuff done. It's a legit work that we are trying to pull off the week to week, environment.
Even just with set up the room and getting stuff ready so when they come, it feels like it's ready for them.
Yeah, because our space is a shared space. So we have to prep our space every single week. So like even just that day on Wednesday that we're getting ready for middle school, it's almost like an all-day thing getting ready for that. So I think it's contextual. Mark, I'd love to hear what your kind of schedule looks like.
Yeah. I think I agree with you guys in the context idea that you got to be willing to be around middle school kids. I'm taking advantage of the fact that I've had middle school kids in my own home, my own children. So I'm able to use that right now to make sure that I've got a touch point, I think is kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's changing next year. And so even my wife, who's been my longest volunteer, she's been doing this as long as I've been doing ministry and loves middle school kids. It's her heart. But that's not what she does for professionally. But so there's going to be some changes in creating environments that make it possible for me to stay touching and connecting with kids outside of the context. And I think that's part of it is if I'm encouraging my leaders to say, hey, I need you to at least maybe once a month go to one of your kids' events and stay connected that way, then you got to model that, obviously. So there's got to be a modeling that's involved in that dynamic. So trying to figure out what that looks like for me in my context is we're probably going to be having Mondays at Mark's every week where kids come over and they'll hang out at my place on a weekly basis and make that available to the parents. But again, my other piece that kind of pushes against that and trying to figure out is that I want to be a blessing to the parents and sometimes creating yet another thing for the kids to do and for them to try to get them to is actually a negative, not a positive. And so trying to figure out, okay, what does that look like? So a lot of it is, Doug Field says this, he's done this in the past. He says he makes sure his first 15 minutes before youth group ever started and the last 15 minutes of every youth group he's part of, he makes sure he is doing nothing but spending time with kids beforehand and after. And I always thought that in of itself is always a good space to make sure that I just carve out, like I tell my leaders and everything else, hey, I'll say hi to you, give you a quick high five, but I'm not going to chat with you at this time because this is my time I'm spending with kids. So in my context, that works really, really well for me is to make sure I'm free that first 15 minutes and that last 15 minutes to just touch with kids.
Yeah. You bring up Doug Fields and it made me think of the scheduling thing, like trying to figure out how to figure out your schedule and how much time you use for prep. I think one of the things that he talked about, it may have been in your first 2 years or in Purpose Driven, is looking at your roles. What are my roles? What are the things that I have to accomplish? What roles am I filling in my current student ministry position? And what am I going to do this week to make sure I'm filling my responsibilities? So it's almost like you have to create your schedule based on here are my responsibilities, here are my roles, and make sure I have time to cover all of these things.
Yep.
Just to throw random, use the opportunities that are there. Like this week, we had kids dropped off super early,
right.
And my first response was to get frustrated. And I had to step back and realize there are kids here that I can hang out with because they can help me set up and walk around and be a part. And so just being intentional with the time that you do have, even if it seems like, why are these kids here already?
Right.
Like that is huge time to connect with kids. So.
Yeah, it is. And interesting enough, a lot of times it ends up being that 5 or 6 kids. And so there's a balance in that as well, as to make sure those 5 or 6 kids or 10 or 15 or whatever it is. It usually seems to be pretty much consistently the same ones.
Yeah.
So figuring out what that is, and sometimes that leads to conversations with parents too, and just say, hey, can you help me understand? You drop your kid off 2 hours before stuff happened, and
you're being a blessing to the family.
So yeah, so working through those kind of things. And again, I always love to find space opportunities to talk into parents' lives. Now, again, I think I've got a little bit of a context since I've been here for 15 years, and so I have the ability to speak into parents' lives. I remember a conversation about 6 months ago. I kind of kicked a dad in the pants, really, because he's got adopted kids and that kind of stuff. Not physically, but verbally I did. And I had the chance to be able to just tell the dad, you know what, you're missing your kid up, and here's what I'm seeing. Here's the reason why. Now he came and asked for that, so it wasn't. I didn't just throw it out there, but he came and asked, hey, I need help with this. I said, well, let's talk about what you've been doing. But again, that's longevity. I think that's part of it. You have the ability to, people can hear you because you've been around. But I think even as somebody that's been doing it for a year and stuff like that, for yourself to be able to hand some parents off that Brett's much more familiar with, right, or working together to say, hey, can you help me? This is a situation with this parent. Oh, let me tell you about this parent. Me and the high school pastor, we share the same office. We have those conversations all the time, how to set each other up for success with the families that we have.
That's actually, when you said, I was curious what your office setup was, because that's probably one of the best ways to, going back to what you were saying about being good friends with people in the ministry above and below you. We office as a student ministry. We're all in the same space. So that's key to being able to share information, do the handoff well, and become friends with the people in the other ministry. It's actually just officing together.
Yeah, and I actually intentionally go and spend time in the children's ministry. Especially the 6 months leading up to getting the incoming sixth graders. I'll actually go physically do some of my work in his space. Because of the exact same thing of just making sure we're hearing about stuff. Because a lot of times they'll say, hey, this family's coming in. Let me tell you about them. And like, oh, I'm glad I know that now. And so that to me is also extremely useful.
Man, we are killing you, Ronald. We are like going all over the place with these answers.
No, it's still good stuff. And again, I completely expect this from middle school pastors. Dad, to answer the question that you actually asked, just to go in there. No, a whole bunch of good stuff, guys. A lot of schedule things. Hey, spend time with students. Brett, I appreciate you reminding us that spending time with your leaders does not equal and can't replace spending time with students. You can multiply yourself in a sense, but you as well have to be out there. Chad, my week, and I'm speaking as a non-expert on this topic, but my week.
You're just as much an expert as we are.
Amen.
Ended up being about 1 day for prep and study. Just going, hey, this is my day. It's typically Monday. And trying to figure out, hey, this is what I'm studying this week. This is where we're going, studying that way. 1 day doing administrative stuff, the emails that everybody loves, working in our fellowship one, which is our attendance tracker. I just, get lost in the weeds of that. Another day for a program. So let's just say, hey, teaching time, small group time. That's about, one of my days is spent totally getting ready and performing that, making it happen. And then I really give myself another day to just have that white space of what's coming up. Things that I don't know are going to be happening. I let them happen at that point. Things that I want to vision plan for and say, hey, we've got this retreat coming up. What's it going to look like? Is it going to be the same as last year? Let me meet with people. Let me meet with our other student ministry team. And I wish it would be like, hey, Monday, the only thing I do on Monday is prep. And the only thing I do on Tuesday is admin. But it just doesn't work out that way. So trying to set those goals up for me, like, hey, my work week, I'm going to make sure I give myself hours-wise at least 1 day of this and at least 1 day of that.
That's really good, Ronald. That's I'm like taking notes. That's awesome.
Hey, I'm learning as well, and trust me, that's from learning here. All right, I want to be respectful of you guys' time. We said this is going to be an hour. Give me your one big challenge for those working with middle school students. The one big thing that you would say, hey man, if you're going to work with middle school students, this is what I want you to get. This is what I think would be the challenge for you. I want you to really drive this one home. what would that be? And
Is
then
this-
we'll wrap up here.
For other youth pastors or for volunteers?
Oh man, you know what, Brett? I'll give you both because you're going to talk about it anyways. Yeah, give us both, man. Give us both.
We'll let Mark go first then.
Oh, yes. A challenge. I've kind of already laid it out for you guys in the discussion and everything else. I think for youth pastors, your relationship with the children's ministry and the high school ministry, I can't overemphasize that enough, especially if you're in a larger setting where there are different roles and responsibilities. That relationship's going to impact everything you do with your kids, especially since we sat right smack dab in the middle of all that. The other thing with adult leaders and with working one, if you don't have adult leaders in your space, find them. Do whatever you can. Talk to the kids. Here's, I guess, a way that you can get that is talk to the kids themselves. Hey, who do you like here that are adults in our church? Who are some of the people that you enjoy spending some time with, that you kind of enjoy sitting down and talking with? You'll find that dad that just kind of relates with the kids. Then go have coffee, go feed them, offer him your first child, whatever you need to do to make it possible to get him interested, at least looking at your ministry. And I think the other thing is you need to make sure you've got yourself a pretty clear understanding for somebody that's interested in joining your group. We've got a handbook is what we have, and it just kind of lays out, what is the expectations of being a sponsor here, timelines, what we want them to do, challenges, explanation of things like where if you have your own kid, what should you do if you need to discipline your own kid in this space, and all those kind of things. Just figuring out different ways of making sure you set them up for success. And I found every single person, whether they're a reader or not, they like getting that information, and so I always like to be able to do that. So that's, to me, is probably the biggest challenges is one, have a relationship with children and your high school guy, make that a priority, and then two, make sure you find some other people to do this with.
Cool. All right, Ronald, I'm going to throw you a curveball here because I'm going to combine the leader and the pastor into one thing. So I'm going to say that one of the biggest challenges for anybody who works with middle schoolers, whether you're the youth pastor, the middle school pastor, or a youth volunteer, is they don't need another friend. I think that's one of the things that a lot of times people who work with students, in particular middle schoolers, and I think it maybe even for younger leaders more than older leaders, is that you feel like you have to be their friend. Middle schoolers don't need another friend. They've got lots of friends. They don't need their youth pastor to be. Now, they need you to be friendly.
Yeah, that's
we
good.
need to create an environment where they feel like they belong, that you're friendly with them, that they feel like you get their culture, you can make some references, you kind of get where they're coming from. But I think one of the dangers that a lot of people who work with students, in particular middle schoolers, get into is that they become friends first, and then when they have to kind of put their foot down, it can sever relationships. So one of the biggest things I would say, the biggest challenges is being friendly without being their friends, because they don't need friends. They need someone. They need an adult who loves and cares about them.
Yeah, that's good.
And so that's that. I rolled it into one.
And let me just say with that, I always call it create, remember, win moments. Create, remember, win moments with the kids. Not as much the friend dynamic, but hey, you remember when we went down the sledding hill together?
Yeah.
When you're confronting a kid, you can start with that kind of conversation. It makes it a lot easier when you have to confront a kid or walk through something.
Yep.
I would say the thing that I've seen always get you the furthest with your middle schoolers is just being you. And that's, again, it's simple. But for so long, I tried to be who my former youth pastors were. And kids knew I wasn't being myself. And no matter how much time I spent with them and how much I tried to connect, it wasn't going anywhere. Until I realized that I can be me and connect with kids that aren't like me.
That's good.
It made a big difference in actually reaching whoever comes through those doors. So being comfortable with who you are and having fun go so far with middle school.
Is Doug Fields the guy who says that students have a BS meter and that they can tell, like, when you're faking it, like they'll get in there.
It's Doug, but I've heard that before. That's for sure.
That's you, Taylor, realizing, hey, I got to be myself because these kids can see right through me.
Yeah, they can smell through fake so fast. That's incredible.
Yep. Hey, real quick, guys, I did throw on the chat a Google doc on just what we write to send to parents after we have our second-time kids. So if that's a useful tool,
Awesome.
yeah, use it away.
That's awesome. I've got that link right here, man. Hey, guys, thanks for really being experts in middle school ministry and for diving into what is terrifying to some youth pastors and not worthwhile to others, but is in reality a super important part of our ministry, is ministering to these middle schoolers as they grow and as they mature and they transition.
Yeah,
Really
man.
appreciate
Hey,
you guys.
listen, I love it. If my current role doesn't work out, Taylor better be on the lookout because I want his.
You want his job back. Yeah, there you go.
Because I love middle school ministry. It's super fun, man. It does
Awesome.
take a calling, but it is so good. I love it.
Amen.
Hey, I'm going to stop this broadcast. Chad, you're welcome to still keep hanging out, but I'm going to make this go out of here.